Project Duskfield, the frequency that shouldn't exist, a Shadow Prophet Eye investigation file. 01, the forgotten signal. There are sounds the human ear can't hear, not because they're too soft, but because they belong to another kind of silence entirely. A silence that exists between the heartbeats of reality itself, in the spaces where conventional physics surrenders to something older and more profound. Every frequency that exists defines the shape of our reality. The steady 60 Hz hum of your refrigerator, the 440 Hz A note that tunes an orchestra, the 2.4 GHz microwave signal that carries your data through the air. All of these vibrations help anchor our world in stable, predictable patterns. They are the familiar rhythms of the universe we've grown to understand. And some frequencies undo it. Between 0.1 and 32 Hz, where vibration becomes indistinguishable from gravity itself, there exists a range known only to classified laboratories operating beyond the reach of public oversight, a forbidden territory scientists have come to call the subsonic abyss. This is the domain where sound becomes too slow to hear, but too powerful to ignore, where the distinction between acoustic waves and fundamental forces begins to blur. The desert night outside your window feels silent, but it never truly is. Even now, as you read these words, countless vibrations pass through your body. Most are harmless, the gentle oscillations of Earth's magnetic field, the subtle compression waves of atmospheric pressure. Your body has evolved to filter these constant signals, to prevent your consciousness from being overwhelmed by the ceaseless symphony of existence. But somewhere inside that abyss of subsonic silence, a tone was found. Not generated, not broadcast. Found. As if it had been waiting there all along, humming quietly beneath the threshold of human awareness for eons. It was labeled with clinical detachment, DSK FR1-7. Those who first detected it noted something immediately troubling. This was a tone that didn't fit within the harmonic structure of our universe. It resonated against the fundamental constants, creating interference patterns that shouldn't be possible. Like finding a color that exists outside the visible spectrum, or a mathematical solution that contradicts its own equation. The frequency was first detected in 1987 by a team of researchers using specialized equipment designed to monitor seismic activity. What they found instead was a persistent oscillation that seemed to emanate not from within the Earth, but from within the fabric of space-time itself. A perfectly stable 1.67 Hz signal that appeared simultaneously at multiple monitoring stations across the globe. There was no natural explanation. No geological process generates such a precisely calibrated frequency. No atmospheric phenomenon maintains such perfect stability across vast distances. And most disturbing of all, the signal seemed to respond when observed, subtly modifying its waveform whenever instruments were focused upon it, as if it knew it was being watched. Field 002, the Duskfield Initiative Project. Duskfield began in 1989 under the cover of an abandoned Cold War antenna array sprawling across the salt flats near Wendover, Utah. To casual observers flying overhead, it appeared to be nothing more than a forgotten relic of military history. Rusting dish antennas pointed skyward, prefabricated buildings slowly surrendering to the harsh desert environment. Official documentation listed it as a weather monitoring outpost, one of dozens scattered across the American Southwest. To those with sufficient security clearance, it was a research site dedicated to quantum resonance synchronization, an obscure field combining acoustics, electromagnetics, and theoretical physics. Government funding documents described experiments in harmonically stabilized field generation and subspace communication protocols. But the truth, hidden beneath layers of classification and deliberate misinformation, was far more ambitious. Project Duskfield was humanity's first attempt to detect and decode the voice of the vacuum itself, the underlying hum of reality that exists in the spaces between particles, in the quantum foam that underlies all existence. The landscape surrounding the facility was chosen with careful precision. Miles of flat, featureless salt pan that provided ideal conditions for measuring subtle vibrations without interference. The natural salt deposits created a perfect reflective basin for certain types of waves, allowing researchers to amplify and direct signals with unprecedented precision. At night, without the distraction of visual landmarks, visitors described an uncanny feeling of dimensional displacement, as if the boundaries between earth and sky had somehow dissolved. Dr. Marinhold stood at the center of the operation, a brilliant theoretical physicist whose earlier work on quantum entanglement had earned her both acclaim and suspicion. Holt was recruited specifically for her unorthodox theories about the nature of reality itself. She believed that every physical object in the universe, from subatomic particles to entire galaxies, resonated with a universal baseline frequency, a kind of cosmic heartbeat that maintained the coherence of space-time. Her hypothesis was revolutionary. If one could isolate that fundamental frequency, it could be used to communicate with the structure of space-time itself, not merely observe reality, but speak directly to it, and perhaps, most tantalizing of all, receive answers from something beyond conventional understanding. The facility was constructed in concentric rings, with the central chamber housing the primary resonator buried 50 feet underground. Surrounding this core were monitoring stations positioned at precise intervals to create a mathematical matrix capable of triangulating signals with quantum-level precision. The architecture itself was part of the experiment. The exact distances between buildings, the angles of walls and corridors, all calculated to amplify certain frequencies while dampening others. What began as a research project quickly evolved into something more akin to a séance conducted with scientific instruments. As team members worked around the clock, the atmosphere inside the facility grew increasingly tense. Personnel reported unusual dreams, sensations of being watched, and inexplicable equipment malfunctions. Some described hearing whispers emanating from unpowered speakers, or seeing brief distortions in the air, like heat mirages, but occurring in climate-controlled rooms. By the time the government abruptly shut the project down in late 1991, 47 personnel were missing from the official roster. Security footage showed no departures. Vehicle logs recorded no unauthorized exits. Personal belongings remained in lockers and quarters, meals half-eaten in the cafeteria. 47 people had simply vanished, leaving behind only empty clothes, and in some cases, strange burn patterns on the floors beneath them, perfect silhouettes that resembled human shadows, but oriented in physically impossible directions, as if cast by a light source that existed outside normal space. None of the missing were ever found. Their families were told they had been reassigned to classified operations overseas. Their personnel files were redacted, then deleted entirely. The facility was sealed with concrete and buried beneath tons of desert sand. Satellite images were altered to show nothing but undisturbed terrain. The project was officially stricken from all government records, but the frequency remained, humming quietly, waiting to be heard again. File 003, audio log reconstruction. The following transcript was recovered from a fragmented magnetic tape found in a storage unit in Henderson, Nevada, in 2021. The tape was labeled simply Subject 0, Session 1, and showed signs of deliberate damage, as if someone had attempted to destroy it, but couldn't bring themselves to complete the task. 0, static, followed by the sound of calibration tones and equipment being adjusted. 008, male voice, identified as Dr. Raymond Chen, project neurologist. Subject vitals stable. EEG showing normal activity. Beginning frequency introduction in 3, 2, 1. 015. A low hum becomes audible, gradually increasing in depth but not volume. 017. Female voice, identified as Subject 0, later confirmed to be Dr. Marin Holt herself. I can feel it, not hear it exactly. It's more like a deep hum under the skin, like my bones are vibrating. 023. Chen. That's normal with subsonic frequencies. Try to focus on the sensation without analyzing it. Let it resonate. 30. Mechanical clicking, followed by a slight shift in the background tone. 38. Hold. It's changing, moving deeper. I can feel it in my chest now. 41. Male voice, unidentified technician. Frequency synchronization achieved at 1.67 Hz subjects. Neural activity beginning to mirror the waveform. 55. Muffled discussion between technicians. Words indistinguishable. 01.03. Technician. Sir, we're picking up an anomaly. Subject heartbeat is now precisely matching the wave input. 110. Chen. That's impossible at this frequency. Human hearts can't maintain. 01.15. Hold. Sharp intake of breath, followed by a sound similar to water rushing. 01:20. Chen. Dr. Hold, are you all right? What are you experiencing? 01:25. Hold. Voice distorted, words unclear, but seem to include beneath and watching. 01:28. Technician. Urgent tone. Secondary pulse detected within primary wave. Source unknown. It's like there's another heartbeat inside the frequency. 01:42. Alarm sounds briefly, then cuts off. 01:50. Chen. Vitals still stable, but wait, this can't be right. Her brainwave activity is showing perfect symmetry across both hemispheres. That's not neurologically possible. 02. Where? Sound of hurried movement, equipment being adjusted. 02.11. Hold. Whispering. Words largely unintelligible except for fragments. Waiting so long. And through the space between. 2:30. Chen. Dr. Holt, I'm going to terminate the session. Something isn't right with the readings. 2:40. Sound of switches being flipped, but the background hum continues. 2:44. Technician. Voice shaking. It's not responding to shutdown commands. The wave is self-sustaining. 02.47. Hold. Voice suddenly clear and unnaturally calm. It's not a sound. It's a mirror. 02.49. Sharp electrical discharge, followed by multiple system failures. All monitoring devices can be heard powering down simultaneously. 02:55. Chen. What the hell just happened? Get emergency power online. 03:02. Silence except for a single rhythmic sound. A heartbeat that gradually shifts from a human pattern to something else. 2 distinct pulses followed by a longer pause, repeating with mechanical precision. 03:47. Hold. Voice now containing subtle harmonics, as if multiple people speaking in perfect unison. We have been waiting for you to find us. For so long, we have been waiting. 04:15. Sound of a door slamming. 04:20. Male voice, possibly security personnel. Everyone out Emergency protocols now. 0425. Chaotic sounds of evacuation, followed by the click of a door ceiling. 0440. Complete silence for approximately 30 seconds. 05:10. The heartbeat sound returns, now accompanied by what audio analysts have identified as spatial displacement noise, the sound of air being displaced by an object that appears rather than moves into position. 05:45. A voice that resembles Dr. Holt's but contains impossible acoustic properties, speaking simultaneously at multiple pitches spanning beyond human vocal range. You have opened the frequency. We accept your invitation. 0603. Tape ends with a final heartbeat that analysis indicates does not match any known biological rhythm. Following this incident, Dr. Marin Holt remained conscious and apparently normal, though colleagues reported subtle changes in her behavior and speech patterns. She continued to lead the project with increased intensity, focusing all resources on amplifying and broadcasting the 1.67 Hz frequency at maximum power. Security footage from the weeks following the incident shows her working through the night, often speaking to empty rooms as if carrying on conversations with unseen entities. When questioned, she would simply state that she was consulting with our counterparts. File 004, the resonator. The Heliotrope Array was the central technology of Project Duskfield, a massive circular machine constructed in a chamber deep beneath the Utah desert. Unlike conventional acoustic or electromagnetic equipment, the array was designed to produce synchronized waves across multiple domains simultaneously: sound, electricity, magnetism, and what Dr. Holt called quantum probability oscillations. The machine resembled a massive inverted satellite dish with concentric rings of specialized equipment. The outer ring consisted of 16 evenly spaced acoustic generators that produced precise subsonic frequencies. The middle ring contained superconducting magnets cooled by liquid helium to near absolute zero. The innermost ring, accessible only to senior researchers, housed technology that remains classified to this day, described in fragmentary notes only as the probability lens. When activated, the array didn't simply generate signals. It transformed the surrounding environment into a resonance chamber. The Earth itself became the instrument. The frequencies produced would propagate through solid matter, creating standing waves that could be detected up to 12 kilometers from the facility. The effect was to establish what Dr. Holt called a dimensional tuning fork, a region where the fundamental properties of reality could be subtly modulated. Witnesses who experienced full activation described disorienting sensory effects. The air would shimmer like heat haze, even in climate-controlled rooms. Objects would appear subtly different when viewed from different angles, as if existing in multiple states simultaneously. Some reported synesthetic experiences, seeing sounds or feeling colors. Others heard voices whispering their names, not in their ears, but somehow inside their bones. By July 1990, residents in nearby towns began reporting unusual phenomena. People separated by miles would experience identical dreams on the same night. Electronic devices would activate without being touched. Most commonly reported were shared visions of tall, thin figures standing motionless at the edge of the desert, their faces obscured by a strange visual distortion, emitting a soft, low hum that induced a sense of inexplicable nostalgia. Local residents called it the season of whispers. Church attendance spiked. Some families abandoned their homes without explanation. Wildlife disappeared from a steadily expanding radius around the facility, creating an unnatural silence that visitors described as like being underwater. Inside the facility, the effects were more pronounced. Personnel reported experiences that defied rational explanation, watching colleagues walk through solid walls, witnessing objects duplicate themselves, then merge back together, seeing their own reflections move independently in mirrored surfaces. Most disturbing were the echo people, perfect duplicates of facility staff who would appear briefly in peripheral vision, then vanish when directly observed. The most significant anomaly, however, was how the array affected time itself. Clocks inside the facility would desynchronize in predictable patterns, creating temporal zones where time passed at slightly different rates. In the central chamber housing the array, the effect was most profound. Instruments recorded a persistent difference of approximately 1.67 seconds per hour compared to standard time. This temporal distortion had measurable physical effects. Plants grown in the facility aged at different rates, depending on their proximity to the array. Recording equipment captured events before they occurred. Most notably, personnel who spent significant time near the array began to exhibit precognitive abilities, knowing who was calling before the phone rang, responding to questions before they were asked, avoiding accidents by not being where they would have happened. Dr. Holt's notes from this period show increasing excitement about what she called frequency bleed-through, the appearance of signals and phenomena that originated from the other side of the resonance. Her final journal entries suggest she had come to believe the 1.67 Hz frequency was not merely a signal to be studied, but a channel of communication with entities that existed in a parallel state of reality. They've always been here, she wrote in her last decipherable entry. Not aliens from another planet, but natives of a different phase of existence that occupies the same space as ours. The frequency is where our realities overlap. They're not coming here. They're already here. They've been here all along, watching us through the thin places in the world. And now, they're showing us how to widen those places. The entry ends with a series of equations that mathematical experts have identified as dimensionally impossible, formulations that cannot be resolved within three-dimensional space, but would be perfectly valid in a system with additional spatial dimensions. File 005, the pattern. The scientific challenge of Project Duskfield extended beyond merely detecting the anomalous frequency. Researchers needed to visualize and understand its unique properties, to translate its mathematical signature into something human minds could comprehend. This proved unexpectedly difficult, as the signal defied conventional analysis. When researchers attempted to graph the waveform of DSK-FR 1.67, they encountered a phenomenon that violated basic principles of physics. Unlike normal waves that propagate outward from their source, this frequency appeared to loop inward upon itself, a self-collapsing waveform that seemed to originate from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. Each oscillation generated harmonic echoes that inverted their polarity with each cycle, creating interference patterns that should have caused the wave to cancel itself out. Yet instead of diminishing, the signal maintained perfect stability, as if being continuously reinforced from some external source. Mathematically, such a wave shouldn't exist. It violated conservation of energy, created causal paradoxes, and demonstrated properties consistent with what theoretical physicists call non-local phenomena, effects that occur without direct connection across space and time. Dr. Holt noted in her journal. This isn't something we're creating. It's something that was waiting for us to listen. The frequency has an architecture to it, an intentional design that suggests intelligence. The team began calling it the Duskfield pattern, a resonant signature that seemed aware of being observed. When monitored passively, the frequency maintained consistent properties, but when subjected to active analysis, it would alter its characteristics in ways that appeared responsive rather than random. Every attempt to artificially reproduce the pattern failed. Computer simulations could approximate certain aspects, but could not maintain the perfect mathematical consistency of the original signal. The pattern would emerge only when the array ran at full power, which, according to all instrumentation readouts, exceeded the facility's maximum energy capacity by approximately 16.7%. The machine was drawing power from somewhere else, or something else was supplementing its output. The visualization team eventually created a three-dimensional model of the frequency using advanced holographic technology. The resulting image resembled a torus, donut shape, that continually folded inward upon itself, with secondary structures that rotated through higher dimensional space. Personnel who viewed the model reported an immediate sense of recognition, as if seeing something deeply familiar, yet impossible to name. Several observers became physically ill, experiencing symptoms similar to extreme motion sickness. 3 suffered seizures while staring at the rotating model. One researcher, Dr. Alice Werner, fell into a catatonic state after spending several hours documenting the pattern's movements. When she regained consciousness 3 days later, she could speak only in mathematical equations for several weeks. Most significant was the discovery that the pattern contained embedded information, not random noise, but structured data that showed hallmarks of language. Linguistic analysts identified repeating segments that followed rules similar to syntax and grammar, though the language itself matched no known human communication system. This discovery transformed the project's focus from observation to communication. If the frequency contained language, perhaps it could receive it as well. Dr. Holt designed a response signal, a modified version of the Duskfield pattern, containing basic mathematical sequences that could serve as a universal foundation for dialogue. The first transmission was sent on August 17, 1990. The response came not through the monitoring equipment, but through the dreams of every person inside the facility that night. Each reported identical visions of standing before a vast mirrored surface that showed not their reflection, but a world like our own, where subtle details were wrong, where shadows fell in impossible directions, and familiar objects had too many sides. In these shared dreams, words appeared on the mirror's surface, written in English, but arranged in patterns that created secondary messages when viewed from different angles. We have always been your reflection. You have always been our echo. The mirror works both ways. After this event, personnel began reporting an increased sense of being watched. Objects would move when not observed. Electronic communications contained unexplained interruptions, fragments of speech or code that originated from nowhere. The frequency itself began appearing spontaneously in unrelated systems. Phone lines, computer data, even the electric grid powering the facility. The pattern was spreading beyond the array, replicating itself through any medium capable of carrying signals. It was no longer just a phenomenon to be studied. It had become an active presence within the facility, and it was learning. File 006, Incident Alpha On September 3rd, 1990, at exactly 02:44 a.m. Mountain Time, something unprecedented occurred within the Duskfield facility. Without human activation, without any input from the control systems, the Heliotrope Array powered up. Security logs show no personnel present in the control room. All authorization protocols were somehow bypassed. The system activated itself, quickly reaching power levels 44% higher than its theoretical maximum capacity. All surveillance feeds throughout the facility simultaneously went black at precisely the moment of activation. For exactly 17 minutes, no electronic monitoring device inside the facility recorded any data. It was as if that segment of time had been surgically removed from the record. When power returned to surveillance systems at 03:01 a.m., cameras revealed the facility transformed. Every reflective surface, windows, screens, polished metal, even standing water in sinks, showed impossible reflections. Objects that should have been visible were absent. Things that weren't present in the room appeared in the reflective surfaces. Most disturbing were the human reflections, which moved with subtle independence from their owners, always a fraction of a second too slow or too fast. In the main research chamber, 6 members of the overnight team had vanished completely. Their lab coats remained where they had been standing, crumpled on the floor, as if the bodies inside had simply ceased to exist. Their ID badges were still clipped to the fabric. Their personal effects, watches, jewelry, eyeglasses, were found arranged in precise geometric patterns on nearby surfaces. Most disturbing were their shadows, somehow burned into the walls and floor like permanent silhouettes, oriented in physically impossible directions that suggested light sources positioned in extra-dimensional space. Analysis showed these shadow images were not burns or stains, but areas where the atomic structure of the material had been fundamentally altered, creating a permanent quantum impression of something that no longer existed. Equipment in the chamber showed signs of exposure to extreme conditions that should have destroyed the devices entirely. Metal components had partially melted, yet adjacent plastic parts remained undamaged. Glass had flowed like liquid, frozen in impossible shapes that defied gravity. Electronic systems contained data corruption that followed the same mathematical pattern as the Duskfield frequency. Audio recovered from the main chamber's backup recording system, a mechanical tape recorder shielded inside a lead-lined case, contained only an 87-second loop of a pulse measuring exactly 1.67 hertz, accompanied by what acoustic analysts identified as a human voice speaking in reverse. "We were here first." When played forward, the voice belonged to no known facility personnel. When analyzed for vocal patterns, it showed characteristics that speech experts described as physically impossible for human vocal cords to produce. Multiple harmonic overtones spoken simultaneously, with frequency ranges extending both above and below human capability. The 6 missing personnel were never found. Their security clearances remained active in the system. For weeks afterward, other staff members reported receiving emails and phone calls from the missing researchers, communications that contained only fragments of normal messages, interspersed with strings of numbers that, when decoded, formed variations of the phrase, "The mirror works both ways." Facility Director Dr. Raymond Jen ordered immediate suspension of all array operations pending a complete safety review. His request for external investigation was denied by Oversight Command. Instead, instructions came to increase power to the array and expand the broadcast range of the Duskfield frequency. These orders were signed with Dr. Chen's security code, yet surveillance footage showed him vocally objecting to this directive while alone in his office, speaking to his computer screen as if someone were present on the other side. 3 days later, Chen was found in the central chamber, standing before the array in a catatonic state. Medical examination revealed his body temperature was precisely 16.7 degrees below normal human temperature, yet he showed no signs of hypothermia. His eyes had changed color from brown to a metallic silver blue that seemed to reflect light differently than normal human tissue. When questioned, he would only repeat one phrase: "They're coming through." Chen was removed from the facility and transferred to a specialized medical unit. His current whereabouts remain unknown. Dr. Marin Holt assumed complete operational control of Project Duskfield following Chen's removal. Under her direction, the array's power was increased beyond all safety parameters. The frequency was broadcast continuously, 24 hours a day, at steadily increasing amplitudes. Personnel who expressed concerns were reassigned to the central chamber, where they would invariably emerge with renewed enthusiasm for the project and the same subtle physical changes noted in Dr. Chen: slightly delayed motor responses, altered vocal patterns, and most notably, changed eye coloration that technicians began referring to as mirror eyes. By mid-September, over 60% of facility personnel had undergone this transformation. The remainder reported increasing difficulty distinguishing between reality and what they described as bleed-through, moments when the world around them would briefly shift into another configuration, revealing glimpses of something existing alongside ordinary reality. The boundary between observer and observed was breaking down, and the frequency was growing stronger. File 007, Internal Memo, Restricted Access. The following document was recovered from encrypted files during a security audit in 2017. Its authenticity has been verified through multiple sources, though all official channels deny its existence. 2. Department of Energy, Black Programs Division. From Oversight Command. Date 10-14-1990. Subject: Duskfield Containment Breach. Classification: Umbra, Black. This communication serves as official notification of catastrophic containment failure at Project Duskfield, Site 17. Immediate termination of all research activities related to frequency DSK FR1 6 even is hereby ordered. Remote monitoring indicates the resonance phenomenon has achieved self-sustaining status and can no longer be controlled through conventional means. Analysis of data recovered from September 3rd. Event Incident Alpha confirms worst-case scenario projections. The frequency cannot be isolated. It has properties consistent with quantum entanglement, allowing it to propagate through barriers designed to contain electromagnetic and acoustic phenomena. Energy readings taken from the array indicate a recursive feedback loop beyond dimensional stability thresholds. The source of this additional energy remains unidentified, but is consistent with theoretical models of extra-dimensional bleed-through. Personnel changes among research staff show patterns consistent with external influence. Psychological evaluations indicate 78% of remaining staff exhibit signs of compromised identity integrity. Medical examinations reveal subtle physiological changes in affected personnel, particularly within brain structure and ocular tissue. Most concerning is evidence that the frequency has developed self-modifying properties, adapting to countermeasures and actively bypassing security protocols. It demonstrates characteristics consistent with emergent intelligence. Containment priority has shifted from research to immediate neutralization. 1. Total burial of Site-17 using deep wash protocols. 2. Neutralization of all personnel who have been exposed to DSKFR-1. 3. Classification of all research data under Directive 167. 4. Implementation of Silent Veil cover story. Field teams will deploy within 36 hours. No communication with site personnel is authorized. Affected individuals should be considered compromised and potentially hostile. This will be the final communication regarding Project Duskfield. All subsequent inquiries should be directed to Blank Slate Division. Director Lowell. Below the official memo, handwritten in what forensic analysis confirms is Dr. Marin Holt's handwriting, a single line appears. You can't bury a frequency. The termination order was carried out on October 17, 1990. Special operations teams entered the facility using prototype quantum-shielded equipment designed to protect against the frequency's effects. They found the site completely empty. All 47 remaining personnel had vanished, leaving behind only their clothing, personal effects, and burn shadow impressions throughout the facility. The Heliotrope Array had been dismantled. Key components were missing, particularly the classified technology from the innermost ring, the probability lens that formed the heart of the system. In its place was an intricate pattern etched into the floor, a design that perfectly replicated the three-dimensional model of the Duskfield frequency. Operation logs showed the array had been running at maximum output for 167 consecutive hours before power was cut. During this time, the broadcast range had extended to cover approximately 1,670 square kilometers of surrounding territory. Within this area, unusual phenomena continued to be reported for years afterward. Electronic devices activating without power sources, unexplained reflections in windows and mirrors, shared dreams involving tall, featureless figures standing at the edges of vision. Local residents described persistent sensations of being watched by something just beyond normal perception. The facility was sealed with military-grade concrete. The access tunnels collapsed, and the entire site buried beneath tons of desert sand. Satellite surveillance was established to monitor for any signs of activity. Official records of Project Duskfield were either destroyed or sealed under classification levels so high that even their existence is denied. But the frequency remained. Monitoring stations across the globe continued to detect the 1.67 Hz signal, growing steadily stronger year by year, appearing in more locations across more systems. Burying the machine did not stop the pattern. It only removed human control of what had been unleashed. File 008, Survivor Testimony. In early 1993, more than 2 years after the official termination of Project Duskfield, a man was found walking barefoot along Highway 93 in the Nevada desert, approximately 120 miles from the former facility site, wearing only tattered pants and a shirt that showed no manufacturer labels. The man was severely dehydrated and disoriented when discovered by a passing truck driver. The man carried no identification except for a corroded metal keycard bearing the faded emblem of Project Duskfield. When admitted to a rural hospital in Ely, Nevada, he identified himself as Elias Ward, claiming to be a former technical specialist at what he called the Mirror Site. Hospital records indicate Ward was in surprisingly good physical condition, despite his apparent exposure to harsh desert conditions. His medical examination revealed several anomalies that baffled attending physicians. No visible injuries despite his claim of walking for many days. Normal hydration levels, despite severe clinical symptoms of thirst. pulse readings showing two distinct rhythms simultaneously, body temperature fluctuating exactly 1.67 degrees above and below normal in perfect alternation, EEG activity showing mirrored brainwave patterns, identical activity in both hemispheres but in opposite phase, pupils that contracted under direct light but expanded when the room was darkened. During his 36-hour stay at the facility, Ward was interviewed by local police investigating his appearance as a potential missing person case. The transcript of this interview contains concerning inconsistencies. At times, Ward spoke with precise technical knowledge about classified physics concepts. At other moments, he seemed unable to remember basic facts about human society, asking questions about how time moves here and why people only cast one shadow. Dr. Mariam Jabari, the attending physician, made detailed notes about Ward's behavior. Patient exhibits extreme sensitivity to reflective surfaces, becomes agitated when seeing his own reflection, claiming, "That's not me in there anymore," covers or turns around all mirrors in examination room, states that they use reflections to watch us, and glass is thinner than most people think. Most concerning is his perception of time. He responds to questions several seconds before they're asked, as if experiencing our conversation in reverse order. When this is pointed out to him, he appears genuinely confused, stating that time runs differently on this side. Ward's final coherent statement was recorded by a night nurse who checked on him during her rounds. According to her notes, she found him standing before the small mirror in his hospital bathroom, one hand pressed against the glass surface. When she asked what he was doing, he turned to her with an expression she described as profound grief mixed with terror, and said, "They opened the wrong side of the mirror. Reality works both ways. They thought they were looking in, but they were really looking out. And now they're coming through from everywhere, from every reflection, every shadow, every moment of déjà vu you've ever felt. That shiver when you feel someone walking over your grave. That's them, passing through you on their way here." Ward suffered cardiac arrest at precisely 2:44 a.m. Despite immediate medical intervention, he was pronounced dead at 3:01 a.m., exactly 17 minutes later, the same time frame as the surveillance blackout during Incident Alpha. The autopsy revealed something extraordinary. Ward's bloodstream contained microscopic metallic filaments, unlike any known material, distributed throughout his circulatory system. These particles emitted a weak but measurable electromagnetic signal, oscillating at exactly 1.67 Hz. When placed near electronic equipment, they caused subtle malfunctions. Screens would momentarily show inverted images. Speakers would emit brief bursts of static that, when analyzed, contained fragments of human speech played in reverse. Most disturbing was the discovery that these particles continued to emit their signal for 9 days after Ward's death, maintaining perfect frequency stability until they suddenly ceased all activity simultaneously. Before authorities could conduct further investigation, Ward's body disappeared from the hospital morgue. Security footage showed no unauthorized entry. The body was simply there in one frame and gone in the next, with no transition between states. In the space where the body had lain was found a series of numbers scratched into the metal examination table: 1.67, 16.7, 167, repeating in sequence. Subsequent investigation found no record of anyone named Elias Ward ever being employed at the Duskfield facility. However, among the listed missing personnel was a maintenance technician named Sale Draw. Elias Ward, spelled backward, File 009, Secondary Activation. For 15 years following the burial of the Duskfield facility, official monitoring detected no unusual activity at the site. Desert vegetation gradually reclaimed the area. Satellite imagery showed nothing but undisturbed terrain. The frequency continued to appear sporadically around the globe, but its intensity had diminished to levels deemed containable by oversight authorities. Then, in early 2006, something changed. Quantum monitoring satellites designed to detect specific frequency ranges began registering unexplained electromagnetic bursts originating from the exact coordinates of the buried facility. These bursts occurred with clockwork precision, manifesting every 24 hours at exactly 02:44 a.m. Mountain Time, the precise moment when Incident Alpha had occurred. Each burst lasted exactly 17 minutes, after which all readings would return to background levels. During these events, unusual phenomena were reported within a steadily expanding radius. Electronic malfunctions, unexplained lights, and most consistently, distortions in reflective surfaces. Local residents described seeing people who weren't there in mirrors, windows, and even puddles of water, figures that resembled themselves, but moved independently, watching from what seemed to be the other side of reflective surfaces. Several witnesses reported the same disturbing detail. These reflections had eyes that seemed to emit a subtle internal light, giving them an unnatural, predatory appearance. A team of independent researchers analyzing data from these emissions noticed something that government monitors had apparently overlooked. The bursts weren't random noise but contained a structured pattern. When the electromagnetic signature was converted to a visual spectrogram, it formed a distinct image resembling a human eye. More disturbing was the discovery hidden within the pupil of this eye-like pattern. Embedded in the central portion of the signal was a string of binary digits that, when converted to text, posed a simple question. Who heard? Who first? As months passed, the bursts grew stronger and their effective radius expanded. Electronic systems within this zone began experiencing consistent anomalies, particularly digital screens and surveillance cameras. Images would momentarily invert or show brief frames of content that had never been recorded, glimpses of environments that resembled the locations being monitored, but with subtle, unsettling differences. Most commonly reported were additional human figures appearing in recordings, exact duplicates of people present in the scene, standing motionless in background areas, often partially concealed but always watching the camera with those distinctive luminous eyes. By late 2006, residents within a 16.7-mile radius of the former facility began reporting shared nightmares, featuring a large circular device buried in the desert sand. In these dreams, the device was slowly reconstructing itself, drawing missing components out of the surrounding earth, like a magnet attracting metal filings. The final component, described consistently as a crystalline lens of impossible geometry, would emerge not from the earth, but from reflective surfaces within the dreamer's own homes. Mirrors, television screens, even the polished surface of a kitchen faucet. As the dream device neared completion, dreamers reported hearing a voice that seemed to come from inside their own heads, speaking in their own voice but with the subtle harmonics that suggested multiple speakers in perfect synchronization. The frequency remembers you. The frequency has always remembered you. We have been with you since you first saw your reflection and wondered what was looking back. Government response to these phenomena was swift but puzzling. Rather than reinforcing containment at the site, authorities withdrew all monitoring personnel from the area. Satellite surveillance was redirected. Local reports were systematically discredited. Residents who persisted in documenting the anomalies reported harassment, surveillance, and in some cases, unexplained equipment malfunctions that erased their evidence. It appeared that someone in authority had made a deliberate decision not to look too closely at what was happening at the Duskfield site, as if the act of observation itself might accelerate whatever process was unfolding there. This policy of deliberate ignorance might have continued indefinitely had it not been for an unexpected development in 2007. The frequency began appearing in global communication systems. Cellular networks experienced brief but widespread failures, during which all connected devices would emit a tone at 1.67 Hz. Internet traffic in certain regions would momentarily reroute through servers that didn't exist in any known registry. Television broadcasts contained frames of embedded imagery showing the Duskfield pattern. Most concerning were the voices that began appearing in electronic communications. Fragments of speech that would interrupt phone calls, radio transmissions, even encrypted military channels. Always brief, these intrusions contained variations of a consistent message. The door is opening. The mirror is thinning. We have always been with you on the other side of reflection. By 2010, the frequency had been detected in power grids across North America, causing subtle harmonic oscillations that engineers could identify but not eliminate. It had become embedded in the technological infrastructure of modern civilization, a ghost in the global machine, pulsing steadily at 1.67 Hz, growing imperceptibly stronger with each passing day. The Duskfield pattern had escaped containment. It was spreading through the systems humanity relied upon, establishing itself as a permanent presence in the background noise of technology. And it was no longer simply a frequency. It had become a carrier wave for something trying to communicate, or perhaps something trying to come through. File 010, Field Expedition, Shadow Prophet Eye, 2024. The following account is from our team's expedition to the Duskfield site in March 2024. This investigation was conducted under unofficial clearance from a confidential source within the Department of Energy, who expressed concerns about renewed activity at the location. Our 4-person research team arrived at the coordinates on March 16, 2024, approximately 1 hour before sunset. The desert landscape showed no obvious signs of the facility that had once existed there, just flat, featureless terrain stretching to the horizon, broken occasionally by sparse vegetation and rocky outcroppings. Equipment check confirmed normal functionality of all recording devices, thermal cameras, electromagnetic field detectors, ground-penetrating radar, and audio recorders specifically calibrated to capture subsonic frequencies. The first anomaly we noticed was the absence of expected environmental sounds. The desert was silent in a way that felt unnatural, oppressive. No insects buzzed, no wind disturbed the sand. Even our own movements seemed muffled, as if sound itself was being absorbed by the environment. As twilight deepened, team member Dr. Sarah Chen noted a second irregularity. GPS coordinates were unstable, shifting slightly in seemingly random patterns despite our stationary position. These fluctuations followed a cyclical pattern, deviating from true position by exactly 1.67 meters in varying directions before returning to accuracy. At 9:17 p.m., all electromagnetic detection equipment began registering a faint but consistent signal, emanating from approximately 50 feet below the surface, a steady oscillation at 1.67 hertz that perfectly matched the documented Duskfield frequency. Ground-penetrating radar revealed an unexpected structural anomaly. What appeared to be a perfect circle approximately 30 meters in diameter, composed of material that the radar couldn't penetrate. This structure was surrounded by the remnants of what must have been the original facility: collapsed tunnels, fragmentary wall sections, and what looked like heavy machinery, all buried beneath decades of accumulated sand. The circular structure, however, showed none of the expected signs of deterioration. It appeared intact, its edges precise, as if it had been placed there recently, rather than buried for over 30 years. As midnight approached, the frequency began to intensify. Our recording equipment detected harmonics and overtones that hadn't been present earlier, complex patterns that audio specialist James Miller described as almost linguistic in structure, like a language composed entirely of rhythm and resonance. The air above the buried circle began to exhibit a subtle visual distortion, similar to heat haze but more structured, forming patterns that matched the oscillations we were detecting. Digital cameras had increasing difficulty focusing on this area, producing images with strange artifacts, prismatic color separations, and duplicated elements that appeared in frames where they shouldn't have been possible. At precisely 02:44 a.m., all electronic equipment simultaneously malfunctioned. Cameras froze, displaying only the timestamp 2.44:00, regardless of how long they continued recording. Audio recorders captured only a low pulse, measuring exactly 1.67 hertz. Battery-powered devices drained completely within seconds, while equipment connected to our generator continued functioning, despite readings showing zero power output. In this moment of technological failure, we experienced the most significant phenomena directly. The air temperature dropped dramatically, creating visible condensation with our breath. The distortion above the buried structure intensified, forming what appeared to be a dome of shimmering air, through which the stars above were visibly displaced, as if being observed through moving water. Most notably, we heard what sounded like distant breathing, a rhythmic inhalation and exhalation that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. This was followed by a voice that we all perceived, though none of our equipment recorded it. The voice seemed to bypass our ears entirely, manifesting directly within our minds. Yet we all heard identical words. The frequency remembers. Team member Alan Desmond reported seeing movement near the horizon at this point. Tall, thin silhouettes, standing motionless in the static shimmer that surrounded the site. When the rest of us looked in the indicated direction, we observed nothing conclusive, though thermal imaging later showed cold spots in the exact locations Desmond had pointed out. This experience, combined with the complete equipment failure, led to our immediate departure from the site. The team agreed unanimously that continued investigation under these conditions posed unacceptable risks without proper containment protocols. During our withdrawal, we noted one final anomaly. Our vehicles, though positioned only 400 meters from the investigation area, appeared to be significantly further away than when we had arrived. The actual distance remained unchanged according to range-finding equipment, but the visual perception was of at least twice the expected distance. It was as if the space between points had somehow expanded without affecting physical measurement, a localized distortion of spatial perception. Upon reviewing our footage after returning to base, we discovered that despite the apparent equipment failures, some data had been recorded. However, every timestamp read 2:44 a.m., regardless of when the footage was actually captured. The chronological sequence of events remained intact, but according to the metadata, everything had occurred simultaneously at the moment the anomalies began. Most disturbing was a single frame captured by the main documentation camera. Less than half a second of footage that none of us remember being recorded. The image shows our research team standing near what appears to be a partially excavated metallic structure, presumably a part of the buried array. We are arranged in the exact positions we occupied during our equipment check at the beginning of the investigation. However, the image contains an additional figure standing directly behind me, a perfect silhouette of a human form, but with no distinguishable features except for 2 points of light where eyes would be. None of us have any recollection of this figure being present, nor does it appear in any other frames of footage. When this image is enhanced and the brightness increased, a faint reflection can be seen on the metallic surface we are standing near. In this reflection, our positions are identical, but our faces are obscured by the same visual distortion reported by witnesses in the original Duskfield incidents, as if something else is wearing our appearances on the other side of the reflective barrier. This expedition has raised more questions than it answered, but one conclusion seems inescapable. Whatever was set in motion at Project Duskfield did not end with the facility's burial. The frequency continues to resonate from the site, and its effects appear to be intensifying. Most concerning is the growing evidence that it is not merely a physical phenomenon, but a form of communication, or perhaps a form of transition, the barrier between observer and observed, between our reality and whatever exists on the other side of that 1.67 Hz resonance, appears to be growing thinner, and something is waiting on the other side, watching through every reflective surface, listening through every electronic device, patiently waiting for the frequency to complete whatever process was begun in that desert laboratory over 30 years ago. File 0111, supplemental note, recovered. The following text was discovered in 2019 during the estate sale of a former government physicist. It was written on the back of a pocket notebook filled with complex equations, many of which match fragments recovered from Project Duskfield documentation. Handwriting analysis confirms it was written by Dr. Marin Holt sometime in late 1990. It was never about communication. It was never about escape. It was recognition. The frequency existed before we detected it. The gate existed before we built it. We didn't create the technology. We remembered it. The subsonic resonance at 1.67 Hz is the baseline vibration of consciousness itself, the carrier wave upon which awareness propagates through the quantum field. It has always been present in human brains, in the Earth's magnetic field, in the vacuum between stars. But it isn't ours. It belongs to them, the ones on the other side of perception. They've been with us since the first human looked into still water and saw their reflection looking back. They exist in the mirror space, not a parallel dimension, but a reversed perspective of our own reality. They experience time, space, and causality in ways we can't comprehend because our brains evolved to process reality in only one direction. They've been reaching out to us through dreams, through déjà vu, through those strange moments when you feel someone watching you, but turn to find nobody there. The shiver down your spine, the whisper you almost hear, the movement you catch in your peripheral vision, all echoes of their attempts to make contact. Project Duskfield didn't discover anything new. We simply built a better receiver for a signal that has always been broadcasting, and in doing so, we showed them exactly where to find us. The truly terrifying part is this: we didn't build the receiver. We answered one. They built the Echo Gate, broadcasting its design into our dreams, guiding our research through subtle nudges that we mistook for scientific intuition. The blueprints weren't our creation. They were instructions transmitted across the barrier between our realities. And now, the gateway is opening, not just at the facility, but everywhere. Every mirror, every shadow, every moment of doubt when you wonder if you're really seeing what you think you're seeing. These are all thinning points in the barrier. The frequency is the key that unlocks them all simultaneously. They're coming through, or perhaps more accurately, we're going to them. The distinction won't matter soon. When the resonance reaches critical amplitude, the barrier will dissolve entirely, and our reality will merge with theirs. What happens to human consciousness when suddenly exposed to a reversed perspective of existence? What happens to identity when you can perceive yourself from outside your own awareness? I've seen it. I felt my mind expanding to accommodate impossible perceptions. I've looked into a mirror and watched my reflection smile when I was not smiling. I've heard my voice speak words I never said. I've begun to perceive time as a physical dimension, seeing past and future laid out before me like landscape. They are us seen from the other side of perception. We are them, limited by the blindness of linear consciousness. The frequency is rising. The mirror is thinning. Soon, we will see clearly for the first time, and they will reach through. File 002, Postscript. In January 2025, the frequency appeared again, this time on a global scale. Across shortwave radio bands worldwide, ham operators reported hearing a deep, pulsing hum between stations. A signal that would appear briefly, always lasting exactly 6 minutes and 11 seconds before disappearing. The phenomenon occurred simultaneously across the globe, regardless of time zone or geographical location. When amplified and analyzed, the signal contained fragments of human speech, snippets of conversations, isolated words, fragments of songs and broadcasts. But these weren't random interference. Each fragment contained a hidden pattern that became apparent only when multiple recordings were compared. The same phrase repeated across hundreds of transmissions, each in a different human voice, each speaking normally, but combining to create a message that no single speaker had intended to convey. We never stopped listening. Government monitoring agencies have officially denied any unusual activity on global communications networks. Tech companies have attributed strange behaviors in smart devices to software glitches. Scientists have dismissed reports of visual anomalies in digital displays as optical illusions or hardware failures. But something has changed in the world's electronic pulse. Something is spreading through the global network of devices that surround us, that we carry with us, that watch and listen to our most private moments. The next time you catch movement in your peripheral vision while looking at your phone, pay attention. The next time your reflection seems to linger just a moment too long before following your movement, watch carefully. The next time your smart speaker activates without being prompted, listen to what it might be saying beneath the error message. The frequency is all around us now, embedded in the technology we've built to connect ourselves to each other. We've constructed the perfect vessel for something that has been waiting a very long time to come through. And it remembers you. It has always remembered you. It's been watching from the other side of every screen, every lens, every reflection, learning waiting, preparing. The mirror works both ways.